Hello, everybody. Get off my lawn cards. I'm Dan. Welcome in. And as you've seen from the title, I kind of asked myself a question. And I've been kind of asking myself this question since the National about a month ago. And the question is, am I getting too old for sports card collecting? The thumbnail picture is a picture of Tommy Lee Jones from the movie No Country for Old Men. Tommy Lee Jones, if you've never seen the movie, it's a very good movie, by the way. Tommy Lee Jones plays this old sheriff, and all hell breaks loose in his jurisdiction. You know, one of the great all-time villains in any movie is stalking people throughout his jurisdiction. Anton Chigurh, played by Javier Bardem. That guy is just a total badass. And so, Tommy Lee Jones, he kind of thinks about his life and what he's doing as a sheriff. And he just kind of thinks that the world has kind of passed him by. The world has changed so much that he doesn't really recognize it anymore. He retires and, goes off in the pasture and stuff. And I don't know if when I was walking around the National and, as I kind of take in, different videos about the hobby and all that, I sometimes I think I'm like Tommy Lee Jones in No Country for Old Men, where maybe just some of the things that I'm seeing in the hobby are, really has changed an awful lot. To the point where I'm sometimes not super comfortable with the hobby itself. I'll give you a list of things I've seen in the last, let's say, 5 years, maybe a little longer than that, going back maybe 10 years, of some of the things that kind of got me thinking like Tommy Lee Jones' character. Number one, explosion of card prices. A lot of that happened like during COVID. Prices of stuff went sky high. Concerning. Second, people during COVID fighting for wax. You had lines of people outside a Walmart or a Target or wherever, and you had people running to the card places to buy boxes of cards. Now, a lot of that has changed, although I think Pokemon, that's happening now. But, I've been to a couple different places this week that sell cards, and I could buy anything I want basketball-wise. I could have bought thousands of dollars worth of wax. Problem is nobody really wants this year's wax. And so fighting for wax, anything, it seems like anything but a PSA 10 is totally worthless. You've got a card, let's say, that's worth $500 and a 10, PSA 10, and then a PSA 9 is worth like $100, and a PSA 8, nobody's even going to touch. And so that's kind of concerning, where grading has just become like a huge part of the hobby. 4, the company of my youth, Beckett, that used to put out the price guides, and I guess they still do. I actually have a subscription to Beckett Basketball. The company of my youth has really become irrelevant for the most part. They grade like 6 cards a day. They're trying to make a presence on social media, but you actually have to put in the work. When I see that, gem rate, I think it's called, where they put out the population numbers, and I see Beckett dragging ass every day in 4th place, it's disconcerting. Number 5, people becoming famous due to the hobby. I wouldn't say famous, because I think 99% of people, if you have, I don't want to name any of these guys' names, but if they're walking down the street, most people aren't going to recognize them. But like when I was growing up, I knew one person in the hobby. There was a guy named Mr. Mint, Alan Rosen, and he was going around buying vintage cards throughout the 80s and probably 90s. And he had a lot of foresight, actually. to do that. But like, I didn't know anybody. Nobody was famous. 6, the idea of comps. Everything's comps. Everything's comps. You know, when I was collecting, when I was young, this is a real get off my lawn episode, I know. When I was a kid, you know, if I want to know the price of a baseball card, I went to the Beckett magazine. You know, and he didn't do comps. There was nothing to comp. So, you know, comps have kind of dominated, which, you know, you can open up to shill bidding and, you know, oh, one purchase 6 months ago, that's the comp, or something that's being shill bidded. Comps, repacks, that's been the big thing in the last year or so. Everybody's doing repacks, and that's not new. When I was a kid, they were called grab bags. You know, people put 50 cards in a bag that they couldn't sell. And it's like, here, you take these. You take these cards that I don't want. That's kind of the way it worked. It's become much more sophisticated, of course, now. Number 8, breaking cards. You know, breakers have become mainstream. And, you know, if you're wondering why you're paying higher wax prices in the last 5 years, breakers are the number one reason. All right, breakers are the number one reason. There's no doubt about that. Number 9, these live auctions. This was talked about a lot at the National. eBay Live had a booth. Whatnot was there as well. Whatnot's booth looked like Caesar's Palace. They had a huge wall of screens and all kinds of stuff and loud music and just general craziness. I think breakers and live auctions are very gambling adjacent. I won't say they're gambling necessarily, but there's a lot of gambling aspects to them. And then just the amount of scams that have been revealed in the hobby for the last 5 years or so. You know, as the money goes up in the industry, in the hobby, I won't say industry. It's as the amount of money rises in the hobby, in anything. So the amount of scammers that are going to try to make money off of it. We've definitely seen that in the hobby, you know, the last 5 years or so. I don't think any of these things that I've listed, these 10 items, are real good. You know, so in some respect, when I'm walking around like a National or something like that, or if I'm watching stuff on YouTube, like these things just kind of overwhelm the space a little bit. And so I do feel a little bit like the Tommy Lee Jones character. You know, it's just like, holy cow, what is this? You know, I walk by the Breakers Pavilion with like Whatnot and everything at the National. I'm like, is this collecting sports cards? It sure didn't appear to be to me. It was just something like, it was like an alien, you know, landing on the planet. So none of those things, in my opinion, are really good. You could debate that. You could say breakers are great, and you know, you could have that debate. But there's also a lot of really good things that have changed. And you know, here's some of the good things that I've seen in the last 5 or so years. Number 1, the National keeps getting bigger. You know, the amount of dealers, the amount of tables, the amount of cards, that's zoomed up a ton. The first National I went to was in Baltimore, I think 2012. It was the last year they had it there. I think it's 2012. And that was a humongous show. Like my brother and I were there, Alaska Sports Cards, and our eyes were just like big. Like, holy moly, this is unbelievable. And it just keeps getting bigger. And like I said, that Baltimore show was big. But it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. There's tons of shows. There's tons of opportunities. You know, I live in the Midwest. There's all kinds of shows. I could probably, if I wanted to drive a little bit, you know, further than I kind of want to, I probably could take in a show every weekend somewhere. I'd have to go out of state probably sometimes. Well, maybe not even. But there's just tons of shows that have tons of tables. I mean, that's been a big change. Number 3, this probably goes back a little further. Tons of creative cards are out there. People complain about the quality of cards, but that's just because you're trying to get PSA 10s all the time. The card, the level of artistic talent to put out these cards is really incredible. You know, when I was a kid, the first stuff I really collected, I should say, was 1984 Topps. And there wasn't a lot of creativity. To kind of go along with this, now there's so many different chase cards that you can get. It doesn't have to be like the big sale that happened, the Kobe, Michael Jordan, $13 million card. That's a different type of chase card altogether. But there's lots of cards you can chase. In 84, there was one, like the Don Mattingly rookie. Darryl Strawberry maybe too. He was really good at that time. So there's 2 chase cards that you were chasing out of 792 cards. And there's no variations, and there's no color, inserts or anything like that. It was just 792 cards, and that's it. And you had 2 you were chasing. I might have been buying Tigers. I was probably, I was chasing those cards probably. But a lot of creative cards nowadays, plenty of chase cards, plenty of different things to collect. You could argue that there's way too many variations, and I would agree with you 100%. But I would rather have too many than hardly any. Number 4, just the growth in the number of places to buy and sell cards. If you're an older collector like me, you had to go to card shops, a card show if you had it, and that's it. That's it. And there wasn't a lot of information. You couldn't go to the internet when I started collecting cards and find information. That didn't exist. So the growth of places to buy and sell, I think, is great. A trend that we've seen recently in the last, especially in the last year with these repackers, is now there's more power with collectors when it comes to selling to people. Dealers need inventory to do these repacks. And so, you see it even at smaller shows, you see people that are buying. And, when I first started going to card shows maybe 15 years ago, if you went to sell cards to a dealer, they'd either not want to look at it, or they'd say, well, we'll give you 30%. If it's a $100 card, I'll give you $30. And he didn't have a hell of a lot of options. And so now that has changed a lot. Although I will say this, there's people that always say, well, repackers are paying 75 to 90% of comps, or sometimes more than that. It's like, if you have Kabooms or Downtowns or Caitlin Clark's, they're paying that much. Seller beware on that stuff. It's not as big a percentage as you think, unless you have Kabooms and Downtowns. Everybody wants those, and I'm seeing a lot more of those in everybody's cases. Expect the market to drop for those. But the power to sell is not only with dealers, is what I'm trying to say. And then for me personally, this is just not a hobby-wide thing. I guess it is, but the last one is the growth of basketball cards. I remember trying to sell at shows years ago, like 10, 12 years ago. I was selling at the Grand Rapids shows. I had a table a couple different times, and I just didn't really sell a whole lot because I collected basketball. And so I had a case. I still have a case, one of those glass cases. And I had like Kevin Durant rookies in there, and I had Steph Curry rookies in there, and I had, Jordans, not like high-end Jordans, but, I had lots of basketball. I had some baseball and football a little bit too, but like it was hard to sell. I was selling Durant rookies for like a couple bucks, Steph Curry rookies for, a few bucks, and nobody's buying. Now basketball is like one of the big things. You know, it really hurt this year when the draft class was bad, but it's going to zoom back up this fall with the Cooper Flag class. There's no doubt about it. There's a lot of anticipation building for that stuff, and Tops, you know, getting the license back and all that. So, excuse me. So there's a lot of good too. And so to sum up, there's been a lot of change and a lot of fast changes. You know, things that have happened, some have happened in the last 6 months or a year. Some things kind of started with COVID, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. As a matter of fact, you know, after the National, usually I'm really burned out on cards. I've said this in prior videos, but I felt really excited about, you know, continuing and buying. I went to Shipshewana like 2 weeks afterwards, been buying stuff on eBay. I had a video where I showed you some of my recent purchases on eBay, and it's chaotic and it's a little bit nutty. And as an older collector, I kind of scratch my head a little bit like, what the hell is all this? But I'm not going anywhere. As long as, and I talked with my brother on this the other day, as long as there's places where I can buy cards, the cards I want, at a price that I can afford, and I'm not breaking the bank for, and maybe sell a little bit on the side here and there, and maybe have a table at a show once in a while, I'm good. And if you're a collector like me that just kind of collects what you like, and you know, you're not a big budget guy, you're kind of a blue collar collector, there's still a place for you. You just have to kind of have to turn down the noise. You know, right now in the hobby, it's kind of like the Spinal Tap movie, where the hobby's kind of turned up to 11 volume wise right now. But there's still places, there's opportunities for you to really enjoy the hobby as a smaller collector. You just got to turn down the volume a little bit, and you can still enjoy this hobby. I know I do. So until next time, Ketos, thank you. Like, subscribe. Still getting a lot of views of the like the Shipshewana show and then the national videos. So thank you. If you're watching those, hopefully you get something out of it. I don't know. I just kind of film stuff and show you what I buy, and it's been fun, you know. And you know, I'm going to continue to do that too. So until next time, we'll see you down the trail.